This spinnerbait. What does this really sound like, and how do bass really hear it? I think you'll be surprised what I discovered. I tested 5 different spinnerbaits with various blades, blade combinations, and yes, size as well. This really changed the way I think about this lure, and in the future, how and when I will fish it. When grabbing one of these classic lures out of our spinnerbait box, we are instantly greeted with this clanging around sound. Now, as far as what scientists believe bass actually hear, once we hear the lure with the full audio spectrum, I will then let you hear it with the frequency topped off or capped at 550 hertz. From what I can find, the 600 hertz mark appears to be a consensus cutoff point, with what we mentioned in an earlier video with the 100 hertz range being one that bass seem to respond to the strongest in laboratory testing. Lure number 1 is a giant spinnerbait with huge blades. First, we will hear it being bounced around in front of the camera. Now let's hear it as it passes by on a steady retrieve. We can clearly hear the metal type sounds as it swims by, but honestly, it's not as loud as I thought it would be. At the end of the video, you will get to hear this with the top end frequencies removed, hopefully simulating more closely what a bass would hear. On to number 2. This is your traditional tandem willow leaf Colorado blade version, and yes, this is an old titanium lure. First, we'll hear it dropping into the water and bouncing a bit. Now let's hear it swim by a few times. It's amazing there isn't that big of a difference between the big spinnerbait and this one. Now, number 3 is actually a really old flip and spin I have. This is basically a jig with a big Colorado blade. This is the largest Colorado blade I had, which is why I used it. Let's go ahead and hear it bouncing around. Now, that clacking sound that you hear is the blade hitting the weed guard. Now let's hear it swimming by. It has a little different sound than the willow leafs, but not by much. Number 4 is a tandem willow leaf spinnerbait. Here it is on the drop and bounce. You can definitely pick up the 2 willow blades hitting each other, and let's listen to it now on a steady retrieve. And now when we twitch the lure on the retrieve. And lure number 5 is a tiny double Colorado blade offering. Here it is dropping into the water and on the bounce. Here it is on a steady retrieve. Now let's hear what happens when we cut out the top frequencies or run it through a low pass filter with the cutoff at 550 hertz. We will start with the biggest spinnerbait. Now, if the research on this is correct, then with this low pass filter on, it renders this huge spinnerbait almost inaudible to us, which would make sense since the metal sounds are high pitched in nature. The results are the same with all the different spinnerbaits, even when we take the tandem willow leaf and retrieve it with a strong twitching retrieve. We can hear the spinnerbaits entering the water with no problem, even focused only on the low frequencies. But the actual retrieve, which really was quite subtle with the full audio spectrum, is basically imperceptible when eliminating the higher, tinny, metal-hitting metal frequencies. After conducting this experiment, I have completely changed the way I think about this lure. I had always categorized it as a big power fishing type of offering, when in reality it appears to be a much more subtle lure, especially when selecting blades that either have little or no flash, something like painted blades, for example. And hey, if you want to watch a video that goes over different blades, how much they flash in different water clarities and depths, go ahead and check this one out right here. And make sure that you go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.